petrol and diesel prices have been hiked and fuel prices have been increased once again, marking the fourth hike in the last 2 weeks.
First up, a petrol and diesel price hike in India may be around the corner. The fuel prices have increased.
If you live in India, then your monthly budget is likely under siege. Petrol price is hovering around Rs 100 a litre. Your daily commute is no longer just a drive, but a recurring financial leak. Finally, you decide to switch to an electric vehicle. But the moment you open the price list of an EV vehicle, you hit a wall. A decent mid-size electric SUV like Nexon, EV Tara, Windsor or even BE6 going to cost you 18 to 20 lakhs ex-showroom. Once you add road tax, premium EV insurance and registration, the on-road price will be reaching 20 to 22 lakhs. Now it's not normal transition but budget breaking barrier. And this is exactly where automotive marketing teams found their masterstroke. The salespersons say just pay 2/3 of the car's actual price and the car will be yours. Sounds incredible, right? But whenever something sounds too good to be true, there is usually a catch. If you walk into an MG, Maruti or Tata dealership today, you'll see premium high-tech electric vehicles being advertised at just Rs 9.99 lakhs or even 10.99 lakhs. A Tata Punch EV at price that suddenly makes EV ownership look affordable. These are not entry-level hatchbacks. These are modern electric vehicles being marketed at price that seems far lower than what their actual value suggests. And the reason behind this massive price reduction is something called BaaS. Some people call it future of EV ownership, others call it one of the smartest financial tricks ever introduced into the automotive industry. So, which one is it? A smart scheme or a scam? Before we decide whether BaaS is good or bad, let's first understand what it actually means. BaaS stands for Battery as a Service. In a traditional EV purchase, you buy the vehicle and the battery together as a single product. But under BaaS model, the battery is separated from vehicles and financed independently. And this is important because the battery is usually a single most expensive component in an electric vehicle. Depending on the vehicle, it can account for nearly 30% to 40% of the total cost. So when manufacturers remove the battery cost from the advertised price, the car suddenly appears much cheaper. That's how a Rs 15 lakh EV can suddenly be marketed as Rs 9.99 lakhs EV. The car itself hasn't become cheaper, the payment structure has changed. And this is where things start getting interesting. In India's framework, BaaS is typically structured as a dual loan retail product. The first loan is conventional vehicle loan for chassis and the vehicle body. The second loan is a separate retail loan for the battery pack. And the battery loan can often run a longer duration than the vehicle loan itself. Because the battery is financed separately, a legal hypothecation mark is usually recorded on the RC in favor of financing institution. Now here's the first red flag. Even if you pay 100% upfront cash for the vehicle body, you still may not have a complete clear title to the vehicle. The financer can continue to maintain a legal interest in battery component until the entire obligation is cleared. In practical terms, that means ownership becomes more complicated than a traditional purchase. And here's the second red flag. The attractive battery rates advertised in showrooms often come with conditions that buyers never notice. You might hear figures like Rs 4 or Rs 5 per kilometer. But these numbers usually assume that you are driving a substantial distance every single month. When you read the contract, you often find the minimum monthly mileage commitments. For Suzuki, the minimum buying threshold can be around 1,800 kilometers per month. For MG and Kia, it's typically around 1,500 kilometers per month. And this is where things become critical. If you drive less than the minimum threshold, you still pay as if you drove the distance. Your actual usage doesn't matter, and the one clause completely changes the economics of entire scheme. But before we start doing the math, let's understand why companies even created BaaS in the first place. One of the strongest arguments in favor of BaaS is leasing critical component isn't new. The entire industry world already works in the way, and traditionally that's true. The idea of separating a high value component from a machine and charging customers based on the usage has existed for decades. In fact, some of the most successful industries in the world were built around this concept. Let's start with aviation. Back in 1962, Rolls-Royce introduced a revolutionary model known as Power by Hour. Instead of forcing airlines to purchase expensive jet engines outright, Rolls-Royce leased them. Airlines paid only for hours their engine actually operated. Rolls-Royce handled maintenance, monitoring, repairs and reliability. The airline paid for performance. Rolls-Royce was responsible for keeping the engine running. Both parties benefited. A similar concept existed in commercial trucking industry. Michelin introduced tire as service. Instead of purchasing tires as a capital expense, fleet operators pay based on the actual distance travelled. Michelin monitors tires wear and tear, schedules maintenance, manages the replacement, and even handles recycling. Again, both parties benefited. The customer pay only for usage. The supplier manages the asset. At first glance, BaaS appears to be following exactly the same formula, and that's where the marketing story becomes very convincing. But there is one massive difference. Every successful example we just discussed operates in highly controlled B2B environment. Airlines have certified maintenance, commercial fleets have dedicated service teams, vehicle usage is predictable, data collection is standardized, everything is monitored, the risk is measurable. Retail customers are completely different. No two drivers behave the same way. Some drive aggressively, some drive occasionally, some keep vehicle for 5 years and other keep for 15. Usage patterns are unpredictable, and that unpredictability is exactly why component leasing has historically struggled in consumer market. The question, however, isn't whether BaaS can work. The question is whether it works in favor of the customer, and this is where we move from theory to reality. This is the chapter that will determine whether BaaS saves you money or quietly empties your wallet. And the answer depends on just one thing: how many kilometers you drive every month. To understand this, let's look at three people living in the same apartment: Munnabai, Circuit, and Victor D'Souza. Munnabai and Circuit purchased the same electric vehicle using the BaaS scheme. Victor D'Souza purchased the exact same vehicle without BaaS. Now, before we begin, this is only an illustrative example and not a direct apples to apple comparison. The purpose is simple: to understand how different usage patterns affect ownership costs. Because Munnabai and Circuit didn't buy the battery upfront, they saved approximately Rs 5 lakhs on the initial purchase price. Both of them are paying a chassis EMI of Rs 29,000 per month and have agreed to battery usage charge of Rs 5 kilometers. Meanwhile, Victor D'Souza purchased the complete vehicle through a conventional loan and is paying a single EMI of Rs 32,000 per month. At first glance, Munnabai and Circuit seem to have gotten a better deal, but this is where their story began to diverge. Let's start with Munnabai. Munnabai is a hardcore commuter, drives around 60 kilometers every day to the radio station. By the end of the month, he has covered approximately 1800 kilometers. His monthly expense looks like this: vehicle EMI 29,000, battery bill 1800 into 5 rupees per kilometer, that is 9,000. Electricity costs approximately 2 rupees per kilometer, that is 3,600. Total monthly ownership cost 41,600. Now let's divide that by the distance driven. 41,600 divided by 1800 kilometers gives us an effective ownership cost of roughly 23 per kilometer. For someone driving this much, the system works reasonably well. Now let's look at Circuit. He is unemployed just like me, drives Munnabai's children to school, visits nearby store, makes occasional weekend visit to malls, and occasionally goes out on weekends. His monthly usage is approximately 450 kilometers. Naturally, he assumes his battery rental bill will be only 450 into 5 rupees per kilometer, that is 2250. But when he opens the billing app, he sees a shocking 9000 battery bill, because he overlooked the most important clause in the contract, the minimum monthly billing threshold. The financing company doesn't care whether he drove 450 kilometers or 1800 kilometers. He is still billed for the minimum contracted distance. On top of that, he still pays for charging at approximately Rs 2 per kilometer. His electricity expense comes around 900 rupees. So monthly ownership cost becomes vehicle EMI of 29,000, battery bill of 9,000, electricity of 900, total 38,900. Now let's divide by the actual usage. 38,900 divided by 450 kilometers gives us an effective ownership cost of approximately 86 per kilometer. That's an enormous difference for the same scheme and car, but completely different economics. At this point, the battery isn't working for Circuit. Circuit is working for the battery. Now let's look at Victor D'Souza. Unlike Munnabai and Circuit, Victor D'Souza purchased the same vehicle without BaaS. His monthly EMI is Rs 32,000. He drives 50 kilometers to Mumbai Stock Exchange daily. That rounds up to around 1500 kilometers every month. His electricity expense is approximately Rs 3,000. So his total monthly ownership cost becomes 32,000 plus 3,000, that is 35,000. Divide that by 1500 kilometers that he drove, and his effective ownership cost becomes approximately 23.33 per kilometer. Very similar to Munnabai, but without battery rental obligations. And this is the key takeaway: BaaS is not automatically good or bad. Its success depends almost entirely on your monthly usage. One of the strongest selling points of electric vehicle in India has always been in favor of taxation. The government wants EV adoption to grow, so complete electric vehicles are generally taxed at GST rates of just 5%. But BaaS introduced an unusual complication. Because the battery is separated from the vehicle and built independently, it no longer falls under the same treatment as a complete EV purchase. Standalone batteries and BaaS services are categorized under maintenance and energy related services and are taxed at a significantly higher GST rates of 18%. And this creates a very interesting contradiction. Manufacturers advertised an effective showroom price. You see 9.99 lakhs on a banner. The vehicle suddenly appears much more affordable. But when you reach the registration stage, reality begins to catch up. The RTO does not view the vehicle and battery as two separate products. Transport authorities view the EV as a complete roadworthy asset, which means road tax, insurance calculation, and various registration related charges are often determined using the full value of the vehicle, including the battery. Think about what that means. You are attracted by 9.99 lakh sticker price, but many of these associated costs are linked to the vehicle's actual value. In simple terms, the advertised price may be lower, but in reality it's actually higher. And this is one of the hidden surprises many buyers discover only when they begin signing the paperwork. But taxes aren't the biggest risk. The next chapter is where things move beyond simple mathematics and enter the territory of control. Everything we have discussed so far has been about money, EMIs, GST, billing structure, and ownership cost. But now we are moving into something much more important, that is risk. Because financial products don't become dangerous when everything goes right. They become dangerous when something goes wrong. Let's imagine a situation. You lose your job, you face a medical emergency, your business goes through a rough period. In a conventional vehicle loan, lenders have legal recovery mechanisms, but the process is regulated and usually takes time. The lender cannot instantly stop you from using your vehicle. BaaS introduces an additional layer of control. Many BaaS vehicles are equipped with connected telematics systems and software infrastructure that allows battery-related services to be monitored continuously. The moment a customer defaults on battery-related obligations, the financing partner may have contractual rights to restrict certain battery-related services. This concept is commonly referred to as remote battery locking. Every BaaS vehicle operating under such arrangements typically contains connected hardware, GPS-enabled telematics systems, and software that communicate with back-end servers. As a result, battery-related services remain under continuous monitoring throughout the agreement period. If payments are missed and contractual conditions are triggered, the provider may be able to disable battery functionality through the battery management system or related software controls. Imagine facing a financial emergency and simultaneously losing access to the vehicle you rely on. This is one of the most controversial aspects of BaaS model because it shifts part of enforcement mechanism away from traditional legal processes into software-enabled control systems. And if you thought that was the biggest long-term risk, wait until you see what happens when you try to sell the vehicle, because that's where the real ownership challenge begins. Whenever concerns about BaaS are raised, manufacturers and dealerships usually respond with a simple argument. If you ever want to sell your car, the battery agreement can simply be transferred to the next owner. On paper, that sounds straightforward. In reality, things are rarely that simple. Because used car buyers don't think like a new car buyers. A new car customer is forced on monthly affordability. A used car buyer is forced on value. And that's where BaaS can run into serious problem. To understand why, we need to look into a real world example. Back in 2012, Renault launched Zoe EV vehicle in Europe. Around the same time, Nissan launched the Leaf. To reduce upfront cost and make EVs appear more affordable, Renault aggressively promoted battery leasing. The system initially worked. More than 60% of Zoe buyers opted for battery leasing. Sales increased. The lower entry price attracted customers. Everything looked successful. Then the vehicle entered the used car market. That's where the cracks started appearing. Second-hand buyers were unwilling to purchase a 5-year-old vehicle if they also had to inherit an ongoing monthly battery lease. From their perspective, it simply didn't make sense. Why buy an old car and continue paying a monthly subscription indefinitely? Over time, the subscription cost could exceed the value of depreciating vehicle itself. As demand weakened, resale value began to suffer. Owners who wanted to sell their vehicles started looking for a solution. Their answer was simple: buy out the battery lease and sell the vehicle with complete ownership. That's where another problem emerged. The battery wasn't theirs. The financing company owned it. And because the financing company owned the batteries, they controlled the buyout price. Owners of older Renault Zoes were often quoted unexpectedly high buyouts amount based on replacement cost, inflation adjustments, and internal valuation models. Some owners were even charging hundreds of pounds simply to remove battery-related obligations from their vehicles. Result: by 2019, Renault abandoned battery leasing for new vehicles and moved towards battery ownership. The market had delivered its verdict. Customers preferred car ownership without perpetual obligations. Now say, is BaaS actually worth it? After everything we have discussed, one thing should have been clear. BaaS is not a scam. We can say like the car hasn't become cheaper, the payment structure has changed. But it is also not the revolutionary affordability solution that many advertisements make it appear to be. At its core, BaaS is a financial product. And like every financial product, it rewards certain users while penalizing others. If you are a fleet owner, a ride-handling driver, a taxi owner, or someone who consistently drives long distance every single day, BaaS can genuinely work in favor of you. The lower upfront cost improves cash flow. The monthly battery charges become easier to justify, and the economics may actually make sense. But for the average urban buyers, the equations becomes much more complicated. Because the biggest question isn't how much does the car cost, the biggest question is how much does ownership cost? And those two numbers can be very different. This is where I think most consumers make a mistake. They walk into a showroom and see smaller numbers on a banner, 9.99 lakhs or 10.99 lakhs. And immediately their brain starts comparing the price into a petrol or diesel alternative. But the advertised price is only for the first chapter of the story. The real story begins after the paperwork is signed. Monthly battery obligations, minimum mileage clause, higher recurring taxes, financing restrictions, potential resale complications. All of these factors continue long after the excitement of buying a new car. And there's another question very few people are asking. What happens if battery prices continue falling over the next 5 or 10 years? Historically, battery costs have been declining as technology improves and production scales up. If batteries become significantly cheaper in future, today's long-term battery financing structures may not look necessarily attractive. In many ways, BaaS feels less like final destination and more like transitional phase in the evolution of electric vehicles. A bridge between expensive batteries and a future where batteries become affordable enough that separate financing is no longer necessary. But regardless of where the industries go next, the lesson for consumers remain exactly the same. Never buy a vehicle based solely on advertised price. Understand the financing structure, contract, monthly obligations, exit conditions, and most importantly, do the math using your own driving pattern, not someone else. Because a scheme that saves one person lakhs of rupees can cost another person lakh of rupees. The difference isn't the vehicle. The difference is how the vehicle is used.